There exists a type of person that the world often doesn't understand. They're not cold, distant, or indifferent to others. They don't carry bitterness in their hearts, nor do they flee from humanity out of contempt. They are simply individuals who, from time to time, need to withdraw. They need to be alone. And in this need, there is nothing wrong, nothing broken, nothing that needs to be fixed. This is an invitation to explore together the depths of a human characteristic that has been misinterpreted throughout the centuries. Let's dive into the psychology of those who find in solitude not a punishment, but a refuge. Not an escape, but a return to themselves. Before we continue, if you identify with this theme or know someone who does, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what time you're watching this video. Your participation helps us create more content like this. Now, let's begin our journey. Imagine for a moment that you're at a party. Music pulses through the walls, conversations interweave forming a complex and vibrant sonic tapestry. There's laughter, there are toasts, stories being told. For many, this is social paradise. But for some people, even while they smile and participate, there's an inner voice that begins to whisper. A voice that says, enough. A voice that asks for silence, that asks for space, that asks for solitude. This voice doesn't necessarily indicate a mental health problem. It's not an automatic result of past difficulties. It's simply the manifestation of a legitimate psychological need deeply rooted in the personality of certain individuals. And understanding this need is understanding a significant slice of the human experience. The history of humanity is filled with examples of people who sought solitude. Philosophers who retreated to distant mountains. Writers who built cabins in isolated forests. Scientists who worked best in the silent hours of dawn, when the world slept and they could finally think without interruption. These weren't eccentrics fleeing from reality. They were individuals who understood something fundamental about themselves, that their creativity, their mental clarity, and their emotional balance depended on regular periods of voluntary isolation. But what exactly happens in the mind of someone who needs to be alone? Why do some people recharge their energies in a crowd while others need to distance themselves from it? The answer begins with understanding that our brains don't process social stimuli in the same way. When we're in social environments, our brain is constantly working. We process facial expressions, trying to decipher emotions. We analyze tones of voice, seeking meanings between the lines. We monitor body language, adjusting our own behavior in response. We manage multiple simultaneous conversations, deciding when to speak, when to listen, when to intervene. All of this consumes cognitive and emotional energy. A lot of energy. For some people, this energy expenditure is compensated by the positive stimulation they receive from social interaction. They feel invigorated, energized, alive when surrounded by others. But for other people, the calculation is different. The energy expenditure exceeds the emotional reward. Not because they don't like people, not because they're incapable of appreciating good company, but simply because their nervous system processes social stimulation in a more intense, more exhausting manner. Think of it like a glass of water. Some people have large glasses that take a long time to fill. They can spend hours in social situations before feeling they need a break. Others have smaller glasses that fill more quickly. There's no value judgment here. There's no superiority or inferiority. There's only difference. And this difference has roots in both biology and psychology. Neuroimaging studies have shown that people with different levels of need for solitude present distinct patterns of brain activation when exposed to social stimuli. The areas of the brain responsible for processing emotions, attention, and reward respond in different ways. Some brains light up like Christmas trees in social situations. Others illuminate in a more subtle, more contained manner. There's also the question of sensory sensitivity. Some people are born with more sensitive nervous systems. They perceive nuances that others don't notice. They hear sounds that others automatically filter out. They feel textures, smells, and subtle changes in the environment with amplified intensity. For these individuals, the world is already naturally more stimulating. Adding the complexity of social interaction can quickly lead to overload. Imagine you're trying to read a book in a quiet room. Now imagine trying to read the same book in the middle of a crowded shopping mall, with music playing, people talking, lights flashing, and various smells competing for your attention. For some people, every social interaction has a bit of that second scenario. It's not that they can't function in it, but it's exhausting. And after a while, they need to return to the quiet room. Solitude, for these people, is not absence. It's presence. Presence with themselves. It's the moment when they can finally let go of the social mask that all of us, to some degree, wear when we interact with the world. It's when they can stop performing, adjusting, accommodating. They can simply be, without expectation, without judgment, without need for explanation. And in this space of solitude, remarkable things happen. The mind, freed from the constant work of navigating social dynamics, can wander freely. It can make connections that were previously impossible. It can process emotions that were pushed aside during the day's whirlwind. It can simply rest, like a tired muscle that finally has permission to relax. Many of humanity's greatest achievements were born in these moments of solitude. Great works of art were conceived in silent studios. Revolutionary scientific theories emerged during long solitary walks. Novels that changed literature were written by people who spent hours, days, sometimes months in relative isolation. Solitude is not the enemy of creativity. For many, it's its best ally. But we live in a society that often views the preference for solitude with suspicion. From an early age, we're taught that being social is being healthy, that having many friends is a sign of success, that wanting to be alone is a symptom of a problem. Children who prefer to play alone are seen as concerning. Teenagers who don't go out in large groups are considered weird. Adults who repeatedly decline social invitations are labeled as antisocial, even when their refusals come from a genuine need for time to themselves. This social pressure to always be sociable can be incredibly harmful to those who need solitude. They begin to question themselves. Is there something wrong with me? Am I selfish for wanting to be alone? Should I force myself to go out more, to socialize more, even when every fiber of my being is asking for rest? And in this constant questioning, in this attempt to fit into a mold that wasn't made for them, something precious is lost. Self-acceptance, inner peace, harmony with their own nature. It's important to distinguish here between necessary solitude and prolonged isolation. We're not talking about people who distance themselves from others due to intense emotional difficulties or great difficulty forming connections. We're not talking about total reclusion, cutting all human ties, living in an impenetrable bubble. We're talking about balance. About recognizing that just as we need food and sleep, some people need regular periods of solitude to function at their best. And seeking this balance is not selfishness. It's self-care. Think of the people in your life who always seem calm, always centered, always with a tranquil wisdom. There's a good chance these people have a healthy relationship with solitude. They don't flee from themselves. They don't need constant distraction to avoid their own thoughts. They spend time with themselves not out of obligation, but by choice. And in that time they cultivate a type of inner strength that only comes from deep self-knowledge. There's also a creative dimension to this need for solitude that deserves our attention. When we're constantly surrounded by other people, by their ideas, their opinions, their perspectives, it can be difficult to hear our own inner voice. External influences are so loud, so insistent, that they drown out the whispers of our own intuition, our own original creativity. Solitude offers the silence necessary for these inner voices to finally be heard. Writers talk about this frequently, about how the best ideas come not when they're discussing their work with others, but when they're alone, walking, thinking, letting the mind wander without specific direction. Artists describe entering flow states where time disappears and they become one with their work. But this state rarely happens in social environments. It requires isolation. It requires the absence of external interruption. And it's not just creatives who benefit. Anyone who needs to solve complex problems, make important decisions, or process difficult emotions benefits from time alone. It's hard to think deeply when we're constantly being pulled into superficial conversations. It's hard to know our true feelings when we're always adjusting our emotions to fit social expectations. Solitude offers a space where we can be totally honest with ourselves, without fear of judgment or rejection. But there are important nuances here that we need to explore. Not all solitude is created equal. There's chosen solitude, actively sought as a source of renewal and peace. And there's imposed solitude, unwanted, that comes from isolation and disconnection. The first is nourishing. The second is toxic. And it's crucial not to confuse the two. When someone chooses to be alone, there's a sense of agency, of control. They know they can return to the social world when they want. They know they have people they can turn to if needed. Solitude is not a prison, it's a retreat. But when someone is alone against their will, when they feel disconnected, unwanted, forgotten, the experience is radically different. And that difference is everything. People who need solitude regularly generally have deep and meaningful relationships. They may not have huge social circles, but the connections they maintain are authentic, intimate, based on real mutual understanding. They prefer quality over quantity. They prefer a few deep conversations to dozens of superficial interactions. And when they're with the people they love, they're totally present, totally engaged. Because they've had time to recharge. Because they're not operating on an empty tank. There's also an interesting relationship between the need for solitude and the capacity for deep empathy. It may seem contradictory at first glance. How can someone who spends so much time alone be empathetic? But the connection exists. When you spend significant time in introspection, you develop a deeper understanding of your own emotions, your own mental processes. And this internal understanding often translates into greater capacity to understand others. You recognize in others the same internal struggles that you know intimately in yourself. People who are comfortable with solitude also tend to be comfortable with silence. They don't feel the need to fill every pause in conversation with words. They can sit in silence with someone and feel that this is genuine connection, not discomfort to be avoided. They understand that sometimes words are inadequate to capture what we really feel, and that silent presence can be more eloquent than any speech. And here we arrive at a crucial point. In an increasingly noisy world, increasingly connected digitally but often emotionally disconnected, the ability to be well with oneself is almost a superpower. How many people do you know who panic if they're alone for more than a few hours? Who constantly need music, television, social media, anything to avoid being alone with their own thoughts? This fear of solitude, this need for perpetual distraction, is one of the great ills of our time. People who need solitude don't have this fear. They know themselves. Not perfectly, nobody knows themselves perfectly, but well enough not to fear their own company. And this is liberating in a way that's difficult to express in words. Let's talk now about the practical challenges these people face. We live in social structures that don't always accommodate the need for solitude. Work environments in open offices, where privacy is a rare luxury. Cultural expectations of always being available, always responsive, always online. Romantic relationships where spending time apart is sometimes seen as lack of love or commitment. Friendships that demand constant presence or are interpreted as coldness. Navigating these expectations can be exhausting. It takes courage to say no, to establish boundaries, to explain that no, you're not upset with anyone, you just need some time alone. And even when you explain, people don't always understand. Some get offended. Others think you're lying, that there must be a hidden reason for your refusal. Few simply accept with grace. And then there's the guilt. The guilt that comes from disappointing people. From declining invitations. From not being the always present, always available friend that culture tells us we should be. This guilt can be heavy. It can make you question your own needs. It can make you force yourself into situations that drain your energy, leaving you exhausted and resentful. The solution isn't easy, but it's clear. It's necessary to find people who understand, who respect your needs without making you feel guilty about them. It's necessary to communicate clearly, without apologizing excessively. Explain that your need for alone time doesn't reflect your feelings for the other person, but rather how you're wired internally. And it's necessary to stop apologizing for being who you are. There's something deeply liberating about accepting your own nature. About stopping fighting against it, trying to be someone you're not. When you finally accept that you need solitude and stop seeing it as a flaw, something changes. You stop exhausting yourself trying to fit into unrealistic expectations. You start making choices that honor your true needs. And paradoxically, this often improves your relationships, not harms them. When you're not constantly exhausted from forcing social interaction beyond your capacity, you can be more present in the interactions you choose to have. You can give more of yourself because you're not operating in survival mode. The people in your life begin to see that when you're with them, you're really with them, not just physically present but mentally absent, counting the minutes until you can escape. And here's a truth that may surprise some. People who need solitude generally make loyal and deep friends. Because when they choose to invest in a relationship, they really invest. They're not superficially collecting acquaintances like social trophies. They're building real connections, based on mutual understanding and genuine respect. And these connections, while they may be fewer in number, are often more lasting and meaningful. There's also a spiritual and reflective dimension of solitude worth exploring. Throughout history, people seeking inner growth from all traditions have sought solitude as a path to deeper self-knowledge. Spiritual practitioners in spaces of contemplation. Thinkers in environments of reflection. Those who sought inner connection in tranquil places. Because in the quietness of solitude, something beyond everyday concerns can emerge. A connection with deeper aspects of oneself, whether you call it spirituality, expanded consciousness, or simply your most authentic nature. In the constant agitation of social life, it's easy to lose this connection. We're so busy being who others need us to be that we forget who we really are at our essence. Solitude offers a space where masks can fall, where performance can cease, where we can find again that spark of authenticity that lives in our deepest core. This doesn't mean you need to become a hermit or renounce the world. It simply means recognizing that there's value in creating sacred spaces of silence in your life. Moments where you're not a son, father, friend, colleague, or any other role you play. Moments where you're simply you, existing without need for justification or purpose beyond being. And in these moments, extraordinary things can happen. Insights can arise. Creativity can flow. Emotional healing can occur. Because when you're not constantly reacting to the external world, there's space for the internal world to reorganize, heal, renew itself. There's also a deep relationship between solitude and gratitude. When you spend time alone regularly, when you have periods of quietness and reflection, you develop a deeper appreciation for the connections you have. The people in your life stop being part of the background scenery and become consciously chosen gifts. Each interaction becomes more precious because you're not taking it for granted or participating on autopilot. Think about how we value food when we're really hungry versus when we're just eating out of habit. The same food tastes different, more intense, more satisfying. The same happens with human connections. When you're not constantly saturated with social interaction, when you have periods of social fasting, so to speak, the connections you choose to make become richer, more satisfying. Now, it's important to address a common misconception. Some people assume that those who need solitude are necessarily shy or have difficulties in social situations. But these are completely different things. You can be totally socially capable, confident in social situations, skilled in conversation and navigating group dynamics, and still need regular solitude. The need for solitude is not about limitations or difficulties. It's about how your nervous system processes stimulation and where you find energetic renewal. In fact, some of the most charismatic and socially adept people you know may have a deep need for alone time. They can shine at parties, lead meetings with confidence, make eloquent speeches to crowds. But afterwards, they need to withdraw. They need the silence. They need solitude to recharge the batteries that were drained by social performance, no matter how natural it seems on the outside. And there's beauty in this. In understanding that strength doesn't mean invulnerability. That being socially capable doesn't mean not having limits. That you can love people deeply and still need time away from them. These are not contradictions. They're just the complex and nuanced reality of being human. Let's talk about the practical benefits of honoring your need for solitude. First, there's the question of mental health. When you regularly give yourself the alone time you need, you significantly reduce your stress. You're not constantly operating beyond your capacity, stretching yourself thin trying to meet everyone's expectations. You have space to process emotions, solve problems, and simply rest. And this rest is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Second, there are benefits for your productivity and creativity. As we mentioned before, some of the best ideas come in moments of solitude. When you give yourself permission to have these moments regularly, you're essentially giving yourself permission to operate at your maximum potential. You're not trying to create, think, or solve problems with a tired and overloaded brain. You're working from a place of rest and clarity. Third, and perhaps most important, there are benefits for the quality of your relationships. When you're not resentful because you're always forcing yourself beyond your limits to accommodate others, you can be present in relationships in a genuine and generous way. You're not secretly counting the minutes until you can be alone. You're really enjoying the other person's company because you chose to be there and have the energy to be fully present. But implementing this in real life requires skill. It requires clear communication. It requires establishing gentle but firm boundaries. It requires the courage to occasionally disappoint people in favor of your own well-being. And this can be scary, especially if you've been conditioned to always put others' needs before your own. The first step is self-knowledge. You need to understand your own patterns. How much social time can you comfortably handle before starting to feel drained? What types of social interaction are most exhausting for you? What types are most energizing? How much alone time do you need to feel recharged? These answers will be different for each person. There's no universal formula. Once you understand your patterns, you can begin to structure your life accordingly. This might mean blocking off certain afternoons or weekends as non-negotiable alone time. It might mean being selective about which social invitations you accept, prioritizing quality over quantity. It might mean having honest conversations with important people in your life about your needs and boundaries. And yes, some people won't understand. Some will be offended or confused. But the people who really care about you, who want your well-being, will make the effort to understand. They may not share your need for solitude, but they can respect it. And these are the relationships worth nurturing. There's also the question of how you spend your alone time. Solitude is not just about being physically isolated. It's about how you use that time. You can be alone and still be completely distracted, endlessly scrolling through social media, consuming content without thinking. Or you can be alone in a more intentional, more contemplative way. The most nourishing solitude generally involves some degree of digital disconnection. It's hard to process your own thoughts and emotions if you're constantly being bombarded with the thoughts and emotions of thousands of other people through screens. It's hard to hear your inner voice when there's so much external noise. This doesn't mean you need to become a Luddite. It simply means being intentional about when and how you use technology. Maybe during your alone time, you leave your phone in another room. Maybe you choose activities that require total presence, where you can't be half digitally connected. Walks in nature, reading physical books, handwriting, meditation, anything that anchors you in the present moment, in your body, in your direct experience. And here's something interesting that happens when you regularly practice this type of intentional solitude. You begin to develop a healthier relationship not just with alone time, but with time in general. You stop constantly living in reactive mode, responding to external demands. You start living more proactively, making conscious choices about how to use your energy and attention. This extends to all aspects of life. At work, you can be more focused and efficient because you have mental clarity. In relationships, you can be more present and attentive because you're not operating in survival mode. In your personal goals, you can make real progress because you have time and mental space to think about what really matters to you. There's also a deep philosophical aspect here worth exploring. In many forms of philosophy and ancient wisdom, the ability to be comfortably alone is seen as a sign of spiritual maturity. The person who cannot be alone, who constantly needs validation and external distraction, is seen as still trapped in an immature stage of development. while the person who finds peace in solitude is seen as having reached a certain level of inner completeness. This is not to judge those who prefer constant company. It's simply recognizing that there's real value in developing the ability to be well with yourself. Because in the end, the only person you're going to spend every moment of your life with is yourself. Everyone else comes and goes, but you're always there. And if you can't tolerate your own company, if you're always fleeing from yourself into the arms of external distractions, you're essentially in perpetual exile from your own life. Solitude offers the path back home, back to yourself. And in this journey of return, you can discover wonderful things. You can discover that you're more interesting than you thought, more resilient, more creative, deeper. All these qualities were always there, but were obscured by the constant noise of external voices telling you who you should be. And here is perhaps the most liberating truth of all. You don't need others' approval to honor your own needs. You don't need everyone to understand why you need alone time. You don't need to justify, explain, or defend your basic nature. You just need to accept it and work with it instead of against it. This is radical in a culture that constantly tells us to conform, to fit in, to be like everyone else. It's an act of gentle but firm rebellion to say, no, I'm going to honor who I really am, even if it makes me different, even if some people don't understand. And when you do this, when you finally stop fighting against your own nature and start working with it, something magical happens. You find your own rhythm, your own flow, a way of moving through the world that feels natural, not forced. And in this alignment with your true nature, you often discover that you're more capable of contributing meaningfully to the world, not less. Because when you're not spending all your energy trying to be someone you're not, you have energy to actually do things that matter. To create, to build, to help, to love in a sustainable and genuine way. You're not operating in constant deficit, always giving from an empty well. You're giving from a place of abundance because you took care of yourself first. And this is not selfishness. It's wisdom. It's understanding that you can't give what you don't have. That to be truly useful to others, you first need to take care of yourself. That self-preservation and compassion for others are not opposites, but complements. Let's also recognize that the need for solitude can vary throughout life. There may be periods where you need more alone time, others where you naturally seek more connection. Stress, life changes, emotional challenges, all of this can affect how much alone time you need. And this is normal. It's not inconsistency. It's flexibility. It's responding to your real needs instead of rigidly clinging to a fixed idea of who you should be. The key is maintaining self-awareness. Continuing to check in with yourself. How are you feeling? What do you need now? Not what you think you should need, not what other people think you should need, but what you really need. And then having the courage to honor that need, even when it's inconvenient, even when it disappoints someone, even when it goes against expectations. Because in the end, you have to live with the consequences of your choices. If you constantly betray yourself, if you constantly ignore your own needs in favor of pleasing others, you're the one who will pay the price. And that price can be high. Burnout, resentment, loss of self. These are not trivial consequences. But when you honor your needs, when you create the life that works for you instead of trying to fit into a mold that doesn't adjust, the result is peace. Not perfection, but peace. The peace that comes from knowing you're living in alignment with your truth. That you're not wasting your precious life energy trying to be something you're not. And in this peace, you become a better gift to the world. Because when you're at peace with yourself, when you're rested and centered, you naturally radiate that. People feel it. Your presence becomes calming instead of agitated. Your wisdom becomes accessible because it's not obscured by internal noise. Your creativity flows because it's not blocked by stress and exhaustion. So if you're someone who needs solitude, know that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're not antisocial. You're not selfish. You're simply someone who needs alone time to function at your best. And that's as legitimate a need as any other. And if you know someone like this, someone who regularly needs to withdraw, be patient with them. Don't take it personally. Understand that when they say they need alone time, they're not rejecting you. They're taking care of themselves so they can be fully present when they're with you. And that's a gift, not a rejection. Solitude is not the opposite of connection. For many, it's what makes true connection possible. It's the space where they reorganize, recharge, remember who they are. And from that place of inner clarity, they can connect with others in a more authentic and profound way. We live in strange times. Times where we're more digitally connected than ever, but often more emotionally isolated. Where we have hundreds of online friends, but few with whom we can have truly vulnerable conversations. Where the quantity of social interaction has gone up, but the quality has often gone down. In this context, the ability to be comfortably alone, to not need constant validation, to find internal contentment, is almost revolutionary. It's a declaration that you're not for sale to the highest bidder of attention, that you're not willing to trade your inner peace for superficial approval, that you value authenticity over popularity. And maybe, just maybe, by honoring your need for solitude, by refusing to conform to expectations that don't serve you, you're opening the path for others to do the same. You're modeling that it's okay to be different, that it's okay to have needs that don't perfectly fit the dominant cultural narrative, that it's okay to choose your own path, even when that path sometimes seems lonely. Because the truth is we all have fundamental aspects of our existence that are essentially individual. No one can live our life for us. No one can feel our emotions for us. Each person has their unique and personal journey. And the sooner we make peace with this individual nature of certain experiences, the freer we become to create genuine connections that enrich our life instead of just masking discomfort with our own company. Solitude, when embraced instead of feared, can be a profound teacher. It can teach us about our own strength, about our capacity to sustain ourselves, about the richness of our inner world. It can teach us that happiness that depends on constant external circumstances is fragile, while contentment that comes from within is resilient. And here we arrive at the heart of the matter. The ability to be happy alone is not about rejecting others. It's about not depending on them for your basic happiness. It's about coming to relationships as a complete being in yourself, not as a desperate half looking for your other half. It's about choosing connection, not needing it as a crutch to avoid facing yourself. And when you come to relationships from this place, everything changes. You can love without suffocating. You can care without losing yourself. You can be deeply connected while maintaining your individuality. Because you know that, at the end of the day, you'll be okay alone. And this knowledge frees you to love more fully, more generously, without the urgency that comes from feeling you need the other in an absolute way. This is the beautiful paradox of healthy solitude. It doesn't distance you from others. It frees you to connect with them more authentically. Because when you're not fleeing from yourself, when you've made peace with your own company, you can be with others without hidden agenda, without desperate need, just with the genuine desire to share moments of life with another human being. And in these moments of authentic connection, born not of necessity but of choice, we find some of the most precious moments of human existence. Not because we need the other to complete us, but because we choose to share our completeness with them. Not because we're fleeing from solitude, but because we honor both our alone time and our time together. May we all find this balance between solitude and connection, between alone time and time together, between honoring our own needs and being present for others. It's not a balance we find once and that's it. It's something we continuously negotiate throughout our lives, responding to our changing needs and evolving circumstances. And in this continuous negotiation, in this dance between solitude and connection, we find our full humanity. Neither isolated nor lost in the crowd, but firmly rooted in ourselves while reaching out to others. Comfortable in our own skin, ready to take off the social mask when necessary and put it back on when we choose to engage with the world. May we have the wisdom to know our own needs, the courage to honor them, the compassion to respect others' different needs, and the grace to forgive ourselves when we fail, knowing we're all learners in this complex journey of being human. May the Lord God bless each one who seeks this balance, who seeks to understand themselves, and who has the courage to live authentically, honoring both their need for connection and their need for solitude. May we find peace in this journey and wisdom to walk our own unique path through this life.